Hi everybody, and hope you're doing well. Had a great weekend and are going to have a great week. Today I want to talk about index investing and why it can sometimes make sense and why often it might not make sense, and understanding the risk you're getting into when you just say, well, why don't I just buy the S&P 500, which you can buy from Vanguard or iShares or the SPDR for, virtually 4 or 5 basis points. And this is why you don't just go buy an index and sit in and forget it. Because you have prolonged periods of massive underperformance when investing in just one index. And if you look at the S&P 500, you've gone this period, 13 years, zero return. This, we are looking at the Great Depression right here, 16 years, basically zero return. And you don't have to go back all that far to look at a 13-year period where there was a 1.7% compounded rate of return. And if you go out, even include last year's huge year, it's still just about 3%. So what have the other indexes done? Well, maybe the S&P is not the best one to invest in, so maybe you should just invest in REITs. Well, REITs don't go back near as far as the S&P to 1926, but over the last 6 years, 7 years, you've gotten 1% rate of return. Commodities, for the period of almost, 16-year period, 3% return. You could have put your money in the bank and done better. International, 14-year period, 3% return. And then you look at emerging markets, went almost a decade where it was virtually flat. Now, so what's the alternative? If there was one index that was always the best, then I would say you put it in that and you do forget it. But the reality is you can't, because what happens is 1 year commodities do the best, 1 year REITs, the next year emerging markets, and it just flip-flops and flip-flops. And I could lay you out a chart which showed every asset class from large cap growth, domestic U.S. largest companies to emerging market value companies on one end, and list them out here, and a different one is the best performer year in, year out. So what can you expect if you spread it out among all the different indexes, among all asset classes, and then weight it just towards the smart dimensions of return that make sense? You never had to go. Worst ever 10-year period of time, 97 to 08, including 97, so 10 years was still a positive 5.6% compounded rate of return, which isn't necessarily what I think people think is great, but it's still positive. You still made money on your money, and you didn't even have to dream of going something like 13 years where virtually your money would have been better off sitting in the bank. So this is why you diversify. It's why you own multiple asset classes. You quit taking the guesswork and you start shrinking that performance over 10, 15, 20 years where you might not make any money, and you just give yourself a much better opportunity. So the other thing I want to say too is this has also played out way to your advantage. If you go from 1973, this is compounded about 13.5%, the S&P at about 10, which is a huge difference in dollar figures to you at the end of the day. Hope this stuff makes sense. Call me if you have questions, 770-984-2312. Hope this week your money's making money for you.